a brand new episode. It sounds like I'm speaking with God's voice. We're in the right place. Of Big HN. It is a debate series, which is no longer a debate series, but a happening, or a conversation, or a welcoming, or a chat. So good for you to be with us. Before we kickstart off, just a little bit of housekeeping. For people who are in the room, the bathroom is through that door over there. And because of all the technology up the front, if you need to use it, if you wouldn't mind going out the back and around the side and up that side corridor to get there. If you're at home and you need to use the bathroom, I don't know where it is. So I'm sure you will be able to find it. Let us welcome our guests to the show. I do know who they are, but I've written things down. Let's have a big round of applause, please, for the candidate for Central Auckland, the co-leader of the Greens. It's Qiulae Swarbrick. Ladies and gentlemen, candidate in Mount Albert, leader of Opportunity is Qiulae Wong. And if you're looking in your screen, and Barb Edmonds is looking slightly different tonight, Barb has come down with that horrible flu going around. We could probably do a PSA at the moment about everyone take care of themselves and this flu that's going around, but we're very lucky and honoured to have with us the Labour candidate for Wellington based and award-winning podcaster, Craig Rennie. And finally, independent economist, and I'm calling him the author of a new economic theory called Being a Good Ancestor, which we are going to talk about tonight. Ganesh, welcome to the show. For those of you who are watching at home, we have our live polling going. The Worm is active tonight. So if you're at home watching, you can head along to worm.bhn.nz. When you like an answer, whack it to the top. When you hate an answer, whack it to the bottom. And we'll take some live responses from you guys watching at home right now and get a response as to what you're thinking. Also, while you're looking around, you can head to the BHN shop, bhn.nz/shop. There is a 20% discount going until midnight tomorrow night by using the promo code FINANCEDEBATE. It's a little bit different tonight because we had some people pull out. We had someone pull out because he didn't want to stand in front of an audience that may disagree with him. We had someone else pull out because they didn't like our merchandise. True story. One of the reasons they gave was some of the merchandise that we sell, which brings you back to the people in the room. At the back of the room on your way out, there is a very good price. Some of that merchandise that New Zealand First refused to come on stage because we sold is back there, and we hope you purchase some on the way out.
Hello. Missed opportunity to make the code Winston.
Very good. Never mentions Winston's name in vain. Never. Learned your lesson. Never. Before we start, Qiulae, we made a bit of a joke at the last conversation, the last happening. We had a lovely libertarian guy who came on board. He was very nice, but we put him kind of on the far right. And we're thinking, where do we put you in lineup? Do we put you a bit on the left? Do we put you a bit on the right? Do we put you in the centre? Like, is there a place that you would fit more comfortably in the lineup?
The speaker's chair, or as far forward as possible.
There you go.
Future looking.
There you go. Yes, you're welcome to go further left. Can we just get all the mics up so we don't have to have that missed audio? If we can do that from down the back. Thanks, guys. Right, hey guys, let's get into this. Chewie, do you want to say anything before we start? We've turned this into BHN Live, so there's going to be a little less structure, we think. Anything you want to start kick off with? We're getting into it. Let's get into it. Originally, when this was going to be a debate, we had a prompt. The prompt was the economy is better positioned for the future in 2026 than it was in 2023. And I think originally, Qiulae, you were a part of that debate. You may have prepped for that. I'd like to give you an opportunity still to speak to that prompt and then maybe open it up for you three guys if you want to pass your opinions on that as well. So Qiulae, to kick us off, the economy is better positioned today in 2026 than it was in 2023 for the future. Your thoughts?
No.
Thank you, Qiulae.
That's the short answer.
The more longer form and intellectually honest answer is that our economy is far less resilient now than it was positioned to be 3 years ago. So I guess if we all just kind of take a step back and ask ourselves what we're talking about when we're talking about this thing called the economy, we're actually just talking about all of us, the things that we create, the planet that we live on, and the rules that we put in place in order to try and, I guess, navigate those relationships between all of those different things. And clearly, for the vast majority of people, those rules are currently feeling incredibly unfair and incredibly unjust. So just to pick 3 specific areas where our economy is less resilient. One is definitively when it comes to climate change. This government came to power and has massively undercut the Independent Expert Climate Change Commission, which is supposed to hold governments of the day accountable, but also slashed our emissions reduction plan, meaning that now the Independent Expert Climate Change Commission has come out and said that if we are to even get to back on track, we are going to have to rapidly double the action that is necessary to meet our targets. Secondly, on inequality, look, we know from the NBR Rich List, as published at the beginning of this year, that the wealthiest 150 dynasties in this country added $27 billion to their stockpile in just the past year alone. That means that now those dynasties hold more wealth than half of the country, just 150 households. That inequality produces poverty. It produces homelessness because that is the dynamic of inequality. If very few people hold a lot of stuff, that necessitates that a large amount of people hold less and less. And then thirdly and finally, very clearly, on unemployment figures. So we now have unemployment of 171,000 odd New Zealanders actively seeking work, which is around 49,000 more people when this government came to office, promised growth, and in fact just shredded our economy. But if I can, I just want to make it really clear that this is not inevitable. This is the consequences of active and intentional political decisions, and different decisions can be made. So the bad stuff is not inevitable, but critically, the good stuff isn't inevitable either. We are going to actively have to work for it, which means looking our fellow New Zealander in the eye and figuring out the common basic things that we're all willing to fight for, not only for ourselves, not only for the people that we know and love, but also for those that we don't know, and dare I say, the point of democracy, the things that we're willing to fight for those we don't even like.
Chloe just used the phrase, it's not inevitable. That was a Thanos thing, eh? He was inevitable. So it seems that what Chloe's saying is that they're like the Avengers, and the guys who are saying it's inevitable are currently in. It's just my spin. It's my spin.
Much better than a sports.
Very good. You didn't get that one. Got it. Craig, do you want to jump in on that? How's our economy now compared to 23 for moving forward?
Sure. Thank you. And Barbara Edmonds sends her apologies, and apologies actually for having to listen to my accent for this evening. So apologies again. So I've just got, after 3 years of this government, I've just got one question for you all. Do you feel back on track yet? Good. Otherwise, this was going to get awkward, right? We are in a city where unemployment has doubled inside 2.5 years. Newtown School has 410 kids in it. I can fill that school 11 times over with just the number of new children who live in material poverty in just the past 2 years. I can take you to Ngāti Apa Street in Strathmore Park. 61 units of housing. Every single one of them is empty and derelict and has been for the past 3 years. There should be new, warm, dry units of housing on that street now, and they're all derelict, and we have record homelessness on the streets in Wellington. We've got inflation at 4.1%. We've got a cost of living crisis that's out of control. We've got unemployment at 5.6%. But when you dig under that, you've got 37% of 15 to 24-year-olds unemployed or underemployed. That's 1 in 3 young people not in work or not in enough work. So are we back on track yet? No, we're absolutely not back on track. And all we've had is 3 years of cut after cut after cut. In this city, we've lost 5,000 public sector workers. And we're about to lose another 5,000 public sector workers on the bonfire of trying to chase an idea that we can somehow cut our way to prosperity. And we can't do that I come from the country where we have destruction tested that theory and it doesn't work. So on every measure, things are worse. On every measure in New Zealand, things are going backwards. So my plea to you is really simple. We have 70 days left to make a real difference at this election. 70 days to put people at the centre of economic decision-making. And 70 days to make this a one-term government.
Just because of the space we're in, when you guys are using the mic, we'll just have it nice and close to your mouth so we don't get that feedback. Q, do you want to jump in on this conversation?
Yeah, love to. And yeah, I agree, we're not in a stronger position now than we were 3 years ago. And to illustrate that, I'll tell a short story about why I even ended up in politics in the first place. At the change of government in 2023, I was at KPMG working in climate and sustainability reporting with some big corporates on looking at their climate risk to their business and to society. I'd spent most of my career before that working with much more purpose-driven, small startups, really driving a different way of doing business. But I went to KPMG because I wanted to work with the 95% of businesses that seemed like they weren't quite getting it, that they were still putting profit above all else. And we were really making headway. I found myself in boardrooms with CEOs and shareholders who took a little bit of convincing, but through many, many workshops and whiteboard sessions, we're starting to understand how good long-term investment decisions around decarbonisation and addressing their climate risk were going to be good for their business, good for their bottom line, not just good for the environment and for communities as well. But that change in government and a rapid change in direction around how we view climate action in this country made those people pull back. Even though they knew those investment decisions were still the right thing to do, government direction around these things matters. And that hesitation and a deprioritisation of our environment made a big difference to those business leaders. And so while it's the sort of the climate and sustainability agenda that got me into this, it's the flip-flopping which I think is really harming us most of all. And I think in particularly these last couple of years, New Zealanders have really lost even more trust that decisions are being made in our interest because of vested interests really trying to hold on to the status quo. And I'm often reminded of this quote, some of you may know, Gramsci's Monsters. In it he says, "The old world is dying and a new one is struggling to be reborn. It's struggling to be born. This is the time of monsters." It is a time when vested interests are holding on so desperately to an old economy, when we have to move to a different way of doing our economy. And I think our view, the way to resolve that is to paint the picture of what that future economy could look like and how it really benefits everyone. It also benefits our bottom line and our economic prosperity as a country as well. And that's really the perspective that we're coming at this, and that I'm personally coming at this conversation and this election from.
Thanks, Q. Ganesh?
Kia ora tātou, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm an economist, I'm not a political candidate, okay?
It's all political though, isn't it, Ganesh?
I have a significant problem with this question.
We apologise in advance.
I think you should. Partly because this is billed as a finance debate, and yet we've got a question about the economy. And you may laugh, and many in this room may seem clear what the distinction is, but many outside this room don't. And it's the fudging of finance as the economy or economy as finance. That is part of the problem. Because immediately when you guys talk about the economy and start centering people, you use the word prosperity, people think dollars. And the other side love to argue about dollars. We can't afford it. We can't afford to feed our people. We can't afford to house our people. Now, if you go by that definition, actually, no, we can't because we haven't got the dollars. I cannot believe that's economics, because actually we produce enough food in this country for a best part of 40 million people. So it's got something to do with the challenges for you guys, you're the politicians, to actually get that message out that the economics is different from finance. And it may sound boring and it may sound dull, but that is critical, because you guys have got to stop being dragged into the finance/fiscal debate whenever you're talking about economics. And my worry throughout is we have a Minister of Finance, we have a Treasury, we have got no Department or Ministry of Economics, and we've got no Minister of Economics. Think about it. And yet we talk about, and it's in the surveys that say which parties are the best economic managers. And then you ask, what are the top priority problems facing the country? And somewhere in there, you'll have the economy, and underneath it or above it, you'll have something called inflation, and then something called unemployment, something called housing, something called government debt, something called spending. What's the difference? So it's that understanding of economics versus finance, which is messed up by your having a finance debate with an economic question, but it's that we all laugh, but that is a symptom of our problem, because we're falling into their trap, because they love talking about finance.
Did you hear there was an amen in the house? That's an appropriate place to throw an amen out there, wasn't it?
Pretty much. Well, that's us being told off. Luckily, we had the perfect question to come out of that. We are told so often with the decisions that this government is making that we can't afford things. So that must mean...
No ferries. Sorry, guys.
No ferries, no hospitals, no houses, big fuck-off highways. So we must be a poor country, right? But everywhere that I look, our median wage is in the top 5 globally. So what's true?
Should we throw this one to Craig first, then go around?
Sure, very happy to. We're not a poor country, but we absolutely make poor choices when it comes to spending. Let me give you a very brief example, and you know this example, forgive me, because I've used it on the show before. Boot camps, right? The first round of boot camps, we spent $4.1 million sending 10 children, because they were children, to a boot camp. That's $410,000 per child. For that money, let's assume for a second they lived in Palmerston North. I could pick them up in Palmerston North in a limo. I could drive them to Wellington.
Christopher Luxon's limo?
Christopher.
Cross some cycleways.
Cross them cycleways.
Cross the cycleways.
I could drive them to Wellington Airport. I could fly them first class, Air New Zealand, Cathay Pacific, to London. At London, I could pick them up in another limo, Rolls-Royce Wraith 2, if you must. I could drive them to Windsor. At Windsor, I could drop them off at Eton Private School. I could give them a full year's subscription to Eton Private School. Just so they don't feel left out, I could give them $1,000 a week in spending money. At the end of the year, I can pick them up in the limo, fly them back, first class, Air New Zealand, Cathay Pacific, back to Wellington, pick them up in the limo, drive them back to Palmerston North, you get the joke, and then hand them a cheque for $125,000, and we're still better off. We make poor choices. We've bought 1/5 of an oil rig with the government's $200 million oil and gas proposal. Yet we've actually done nothing to advance renewable energy, solar energy, geothermal energy, which we are rich in this country. At the same time, we've seen electricity prices go up 20%. We're not a poor country, but we make poor choices. And those poor choices are coming back to haunt us. So we can do so much better, but it's about making better choices, choices that are focused on the future, choices that are focused on putting people first, and choices that are focused on workers, working people, on their families and their communities, not on making a few people better off.
Qiulae. Are we a poor country like we keep getting told?
Yeah, I think to build on that, we're not good at accounting for the right things. We've developed very good accounting methods for money over centuries, and we are only, well, maybe not good accounting methods. I don't know. Ganesh is shaking his head. Good. We love finance. But we need to get good at accounting for nature and good at accounting for future costs on future generations. The fact that we see infrastructure spend as something that happens today, not at all the benefits that it's going to deliver for the generations to come. Things like hospitals get more expensive every day you don't build them. And so if we delay those things, we are only putting that debt onto the next generation, and our kids are going to have to pay for that. They're probably going to have to pay for it in a much more rushed manner and make decisions in a less intentional way because they'll be forced to have to do that quickly. So I would like to see us get better at having a broader view of what is valuable. How do we account for our impacts on nature, on people, on communities, and on the next generation? And I think if we can do that, I do think that is a way to bring the left and the right of politics together. Because if the right are obsessed with numbers and accounting, let's broaden what we mean by value. And then take it from there and move forward together.
The problem that I see is that, and we've talked about this on the podcast for the last couple of months, is the realisation that the only metric that ACT in particular, but more also the government uses for success, is has it cost less? So the only metric someone like a Seymour will look at when it comes to school lunches is not does it fill their bellies, is not is it nutritional, it is it's 20% cheaper, success. So, I mean, I don't know if we're going to get into it tonight and what have you back on the podcast, talking about how do you bring the right and left together. It's like sometimes those ideologies seem to be incongruent, and I don't know if that's even possible.
But I think if you look at something like... Go for the clap.
Don't step on my clap. Let me clap.
If you look at something like housing, I went to visit a super home in Christchurch a couple of weeks ago, which is like a passive house, a really high-quality Green Star home. And yes, the upfront cost is a lot more, but over the lifetime of that home, that's going to cost that family a whole lot less in electricity bills, a whole lot less in health bills because their children will be warm and dry and healthy. And so we just need to have that broader view of what is the price of things, and then I think we can have a more rational conversation.
Can I speak to that very quickly? Because
sure.
We're doing this with tobacco taxes right now. Right? The government has made some changes. It's going to generate more money for the government in the short run, in terms of about $1 billion in tobacco taxes.
But kill more people.
Over the next 30 years, it costs $48 billion in lost output, in lives, and in misery. But we value the short run, we minimise the long run, and it has to change.
Ganesh, to you now about are we a poor country like this government keeps telling us?
Well, the short answer is no, we're not a poor country. I don't measure poverty or anything, or I don't measure poverty by financials. I think the critical thing, and picking up on the conversation just had, talk about values. You talk about what's valuable, or you're talking about cost, but underneath it all, we as a country, we as a nation, we as communities, we as whānau, we as iwi, we as individuals have actually got to start asking ourselves, what do we value? Not the cost of it, not the price of it. Do we actually value it? Do we value a community that has sufficient housing or not? Do we value a community that has solar panels on their houses? Do we value a planet that is actually livable? All of those sorts of things, we sort of shrug our shoulders, and of course we value them. But, to pick up on Craig, we don't factor those values in our decision-making process, because in our decision-making process, all of those things are nice to haves, and the only decision is based on the dollars and the cents. A narrow version of value, a very narrow version of what we value, and also a very incorrect measure of that value through some financials. We should be valuing stuff based on our set of values. And the question is, do we as a country actually do have a shared set of values? Because unless we get to that, I'm sorry, I don't think we can bring the right and the left together.
Qiulae, one of the really clear examples of what we value, and I guess I'm looking to you guys, what the political parties value, is what we've learned in the last couple of weeks, where the budget from Labor in that last year of Labor were hiring 8 full-time equivalent nurses a day, 3,000 in a year, 8 a day. That's 112 a fortnight. In the next 2 years of this government, they've hired a total of 54. That's 1 a fortnight. So under a Labor, it wasn't even a Labor-led government because it was the COVID, but under a Labor government, 112 full-time equivalent nurses a fortnight. These guys have valued us, because that's what they're doing, at 1 full-time equivalent nurse a fortnight. Want to give you the chance to go to that original point of, are we a poor country? But I saw you writing notes, so there's probably more.
This is just so I can try and stay on track with actually answering your question. Is this on? Yeah, cool. Sweet. I guess, though, it is important just to stay with that problem definition for a hot minute, because it is also the case that when it comes to getting to the clarity of those very few nurses that this government has hired, they've also cooked the books and screwed with the figures so that it's been incredibly difficult to get to that conclusion until absolute prosecution from the media, and obviously what happened in the House with Dr. Aisha Varel, and do need to give her props for that, for finally getting the minister on the ropes to admit and acknowledge that reality. But we are currently in a situation where we know, across the political aisle, that we have around $200 billion worth of an infrastructural deficit. We also know that we are in the midst of a climate crisis. We have experienced just this year alone an average of every 8 days a climate change charge state of emergency. And as you've also just alluded to, we have a crisis in our emergency departments at the moment. To fix all of those problems, it is going to cost money. And we just have to kind of reconcile with that as a country. So we currently have a situation where the leading party of this current government, if you go onto Instagram, their display picture is no new taxes, and that is how reductive to the point of absurdity they want our political debate to be this election. Because if I can just spend a moment unpacking this point, governments of all stripes tax and spend, even right-wing governments. What this government is doing is knowingly entrenching a tax system that sees those at the top pay half the effective tax rate of everybody in this room. What that means, based on the High Wealth Individuals report from the IRD in 2023, nurses, teachers, firefighters, hairdressers, the average hard-working New Zealander that every politician likes to pretend that they back, pay 22 cents on every dollar that they earn in tax. The high wealth individuals, the 311 households that were looked at in that report, pay on average 9 cents in every dollar. Not only is that inherently unfair, but it is also robbing us of the investment necessary to invest in fixing the problems that all of us face. And herein actually lies the real irony, is that incredibly wealthy people actually do better off with a society that is fairer and more just and more equal, because people are safer and happier and healthier, which in turn boosts our productivity and all of the things that all of us love about this country. I was speaking in front of a business audience a few weeks ago, because I love talking to people who think that they hate me. And I just started it by, trying to address precisely what it was that they, were projecting ideologically or otherwise onto me. And I said, much actually to Ganesh's point, why do you live in this country? All of you have the requisite resources and connections and the skills to be able to be anywhere else in the world. But you are here probably because it's where your friends and family and community are, because of our incredible cultural identity, because of our nature, because of the stability of our institutions. Well, all of those things are currently under threat because we are not investing in ourselves. You don't live here because it's a tax haven. And as long as we maintain that status, everything that we care about is under threat. So we can fix it. And again, this goes to Craig's point, it is a political choice.
This might be a little bit of a sideways glance to the economics conversation. Is that all right, Ganesh? You've all said on some level we are not a poor country. Then I'm going to start with you, Q, because you've got the next chance to go around. If we are not a poor country, why do I read stories like I did on RNZ yesterday about a person dying outside National Party MPs' offices, including Paul Goldsmith. Because I don't know about you, but that sounds like a third world, broken country with unwanted, unloved, thrown away people dying outside the top 10%'s property. So if it's not a poor country, why the... Sorry, I grew up Catholic, I can't swear in this room, but why the heck are we seeing those sorts of things? And that's an example, that's an extreme example, but, you know, spending a few extra days in Wellington, I've seen the homeless situation in Wellington far worse than Auckland, far worse than Dunedin. So it doesn't... If you landed on the planet, and you landed in New Zealand, and you read that story, and you saw those people, you'd go, poor country. Where's the disconnect?
Yeah, to my earlier point, I think it's because we are not valuing people and nature in the way that we should. And I think politicians and politics has played into this vote-grabbing short-termism, which means that we don't make the best long-term decisions for each other and for our communities. And that's getting worse and worse because once one person starts playing that game, everybody has to play that game to try and get ahead. So I do think that stronger institutions, a strengthened democracy is really critical to broadening that view of what we value. And to Ganesh's point around, like, what are our shared values? You know, when you do talk, I mean, you go talk to a true blue farmer and they will tell you that they love the environment, that they care deeply about the health of nature. And so I do think that there are some shared values there that we do hold on to very tightly as New Zealanders. But I think the rhetoric has become so simplified. To Chloe's point, no new taxes. I think it does a disservice to voters that we think we can simplify the conversation to these things. And so it's incumbent on us as politicians, on the media, on commentators, to continue expanding that conversation and putting, you know, giving the benefit of the doubt to the public that they can comprehend complex ideas and that we can have proper conversations. Because unless we start doing that, I think we will continue simplifying and then we'll continue seeing those incredibly tragic consequences that literally cost people's lives.
Yes, thank you. Ganesh?
Bluntly, our economy has failed. That's the result of an economy and an economic prescription that highlights individuals over collectives, highlights private over public, and that's been coming for a while, and it's been made even more and more stark in the last couple of years, where we've got a policy prescription which has been relatively open to shrink the state. So the government or the state withdraws to the sidelines and, sorry guys, you're all on your own. It's as simple as that. And if that's the economy we want, that's the economy we'll have.
So I'm a nerd. And
really? We've never seen that before.
You want some citations?
You're in good company.
But look, I for a really long time just thought that all we needed to do was present people with the evidence and the data and the citations. And then all of a sudden, things would spontaneously change because we would realise that what we are doing, politically, economically, or otherwise, does not accord with the things that we say that we actually want out of our lives, as a community, as cities, or as a country. However, unfortunately, the main thing that I have learnt is that politics is really vibes-based. And to the point, actually, of, because it's been raised by a few people on the panel, of the distinction between the right and left of politics. Look, I'm in the Green Party. We do everything that we can to work with everybody because we actually need to work with others in order to get our ideas across the line. And there's been a lot of work that I've done behind the scenes with this current government, I know, because this is the situation that we're in at the moment, and we have to pragmatically try and engage in harm minimisation to get the best possible for our communities, particularly for me in Auckland Central as a constituency MP. But the reality is, as Ganesh has just outlined, what you effectively have in a nutshell at a really high level in the kind of political debate, which is, to be honest with you, one that is very much correlated to power. We are talking about a society, effectively, on the right-wing side of things, that is individualised. A dog-eat-dog world in which we are all competing in this race to the bottom. What the left-wing view is, and why I am unapologetically the co-leader of a party that is on the left, is we believe in the collective. We believe in making decisions on behalf of all of us, for all of us, to increase everybody's bottom line. So, to the point of yet another person passing away who is experiencing rough sleeping, look, this one makes me so angry because this actually goes really to the heart of the point of evidence and how evidence is not enough to change certain people's minds. This government was told when it went to change the rules around emergency housing and cutting supports for social service providers that it would result in more people experiencing homelessness. It was told that also by social service providers, by experts, and by anybody who has any experience out there in the real world. The government went ahead with it anyway, and we ended up with the highest rates of homelessness that we have ever seen on record, declared by Community Housing Aotearoa, the same day that the government released their budget, also announcing that they would have a record amount of investment in prisons, which tells you exactly what the government's housing strategy actually is. To unpack the points that was just made before by Craig, it costs on average $200,000 per year per prisoner for worse and worse outcomes. So why do we keep doing this over and over again? Well, because unfortunately, the rhetoric is the thing that so many politicians in that House of Parliament are glued to. So yes, absolutely, the incentive structure. Look, if you were to design a system that was capable, let alone competent, of dealing with the issues of our time, you would not design the Westminster parliamentary system. Okay, we clearly need to change the rules as far as that place works so that we're actually able to solve problems. But your question was about how can we not be a poor country if we have that record rate of homelessness, if we have 1 in 7 children in this country currently living in poverty. Our economy right now is larger than it has ever been. It's worth around $435 billion off the top of my head. Yep. But right now we also have the most unequal distribution in terms of ownership of those resources that we have ever seen on record. So that is why the merciless pursuit of growth at all costs, even though it's clearly not actually happening, is never going to actually deal with the distribution of those resources and or all of our ability, therefore, to thrive. And that's why we need a fair tax system.
So just on that, Chewie mentioned it earlier about where we rank. And I'm looking at a median wealth per adult in US dollars 2025. It's got us at 206,617. And that was from, citation needed, a Swiss multinational bank called UBS Group or something. But the thing that we were boggling about is that for many of us, many people feeling like, we're like, how can we be number 3? We don't feel like we're worth that much money. Is that directly tie into what you're saying, which is because now the inequality between the top and the bottom is so big that the top drags everyone else up. They've got so much that it drags everyone up to the B206, and we look like we're wealthy, and we look like a wealthy country on paper, but actually day-to-day lives for most of us don't roll that way.
That's how averages work.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is also why I think it's so important that we actually just take a moment and unpack all of this rhetoric around the cost of living crisis, which has kind of just become taken for granted.
I thought it was over. Didn't we get told it was over?
Growth is going to get us there.
Okay.
No, sorry. I'm obviously pretending to be Christopher Luxon there. I'm doing such a great job. Okay, so the point, though, yes, the vast majority of New Zealanders do have the shared common experience of everything becoming far, far more expensive, working harder than they have ever worked demonstrably based on hours worked, we are, and feeling as though they are going backwards while standing still. But it's important to understand that this economy, this current rulebook, is actually working really, really, really well for a few. For example, those 150 NBR rich listers who added $27 billion to their stockpile, but also the gentailers, the banks, the supermarkets, who are raking in and recording record profits at a time of hardship for many. And this is where I think it's really important just to understand that what we're talking about when we're talking about fixing the tax system isn't just doing what is abundantly obvious and done in many other countries all across the rest of the world. What we're talking about is actually something that was once upon a time done in this beautiful country. When after the World Wars and the Great Depression, we decided to come together as New Zealanders to invest in ourselves, to do something that had never been done before. Public healthcare, public education, and public housing. And we paid for it by higher taxes on those who had profited handsomely during a time of hardship for many. At the end of the day, it really is that simple.
You've got an ally in that. Your ally in that. Isn't Shane Jones an ally for you in that? Because doesn't he want to go back to the 1970s and we can look at those tax rates, aren't we? Craig, we look like a poor country with people dying outside Goldsmith's office. Where is the disconnect?
Well, I don't want to actually criticise third world countries because in many circumstances, many of those countries are doing better than us in some of those particular instances. But I mean, you're absolutely right. In terms of the averages, I want to talk about a couple of things. One of which is, and stay with me for the geeks in the room, is a thing called the Cates Index. So the Cates Index measures the difference between the minimum wage and the average wage. And part of the reason why this government has cut in real terms the minimum wage year after year after year is because it says the minimum wage is too close to the average wage. Now, what's the problem here? Oh, the minimum wage is stopping people from getting a job, it's too high. No, the average wage is too low. It's the median wage is too low, and as a consequence, everyone's poor off, and it makes our average look, our Cates Index, look really high. Right? We are a country where the minimum wage is too high because the median wage is too low. Everywhere else in the world, the average wage is much higher than us. It's part of the reason why in New Zealand, we on average work 100 hours a year longer than the average Australian worker. That's 2.5 weeks at work longer than the average Australian worker for 25% less pay. We work 400 hours longer than the average French worker for 30% less pay. We produce an economy where we take cheap labour, we turn it into bulk commodities, we export those commodities, and we clap our hands and we ruin the environment along the way and we say, job done. Right? That's not the economy of the future. That's not the economy that's going to lead us into a high-wage economy in the future or more sustainable jobs, because we're seeing jobs being lost across the country. Tokoroa, jobs being lost. We're seeing jobs being lost in other centres, in Auckland, in Penrose, because we can't afford to put the energy on, because we haven't invested in the electricity market, because we privatised the electricity market, and since then, the amount of electricity we've generated remains exactly the same. We've generated scarcity to generate profit. We need to change what we're doing. We need to change our economy, because otherwise we're guaranteed, unfortunately, to repeat it. And can I just leave you with this, because you talked about no new taxes. Can I just put the really important asterisk in the no new taxes part? Because when is a tax not a levy? Because we've seen lots of changes there. Right? When are poor people who have to pay your car regio, which has gone up? Right? When are you having to pay more ACC? When are you having to pay other things? Because, and until recently, we were going to pay a levy for an LNG terminal nobody wanted to tackle an energy crisis, which was tackled elsewhere. It's madness, right? It's not no new taxes, it's no new taxes for some people. And those new taxes will be paid for by you, and you'll get poorer services because we'll have to cut services in order to pay for no new taxes in the future.
So one of the things that we've been talking about for what seems to be half of my life is a big part of our economy and a big part of the problems that we're discussing right now hinge around the housing market. We have built an economy where we buy and sell 100-year-old villas to each other, look at our value go up and go, I'm winning now. But we have people sleeping on the streets. We have people sleeping in tents next to motorways. We have an unproductive economy, and that can be seen throughout other countries that have economies like us, England, Australia, Canada, the US. How do we break that cycle without turning into some sort of Mad Max-based economy when everybody realised that their one roof estimate has plummeted?
If we do go Mad Max, can I be on your side?
You'll be chained to the front of my car.
Thank you very much. Should we start with Ganesh? Yeah, Ganesh, got some thoughts?
Oh dear, housing.
Hey,
Sorry,
Ganesh,
Ganesh.
I get the vibe, Ganesh. We're giving you your worst night of the week. Are you okay over there?
We have to we have to ask every New Zealander, why do they want a house? Do they want a house to live in, to provide shelter, to provide warmth for them and their family, or do they want a financial investment vehicle? It's really that simple. If they want the latter, well, they're on their own. If they want a house for shelter, well, then that's all of our jobs as a community to ensure that everybody has that shelter. If we want to build an economy that's based on financial investment, that's fine. But we should also ensure that people can buy lotto tickets at the same time, because that's what a financial investment is. I'm not interested in the financials. I'm interested in the economic resource that shelter provides. There's a side issue that I cannot gloss over, sadly. Because we've stuffed up our economy so bad, many people have to use a house as also a financial investment because they need it for their retirement. So alongside our housing policy, we've got to have something that enables people to feel safe in their retirement. And whatever retirement package we can put in front of them, that's got to do with other things like a health service, etc., etc. Something like getting the sharks out of the aged care sector, because that's another financial investment. So again, it's a question of what do you want out of your house? And if you want a financial investment, go to the guy next door or the person next door, because they can advise you way better than I can. But if you want shelter, then that is all our jobs. And I do not believe this country is poor enough that it cannot find shelter for everybody. I understand we actually did it a few years ago in a crisis, in COVID times. We actually did find shelter for everybody. So if we can do it for a few months, I'm sure we can do it if we put our best and brightest minds together. I'm pretty certain we could do it quite easily.
Chloe, yeah.
I'm really glad Ganesh raised the example of COVID-19, because I have not seen in recent history any example that actually exemplifies that all of this is just a matter of political willpower. You know, we've been told for decades and decades that we can't house the homeless, that we can't provide direct payments to those who need them, that we can't provide flexible working arrangements for single parents or people with disabilities. All of that happened effectively overnight with the advent of the unprecedented global pandemic, right? It shows that it is always a matter of political willpower and your supposed representatives stepping into the breach and doing what they were elected to do. Which is why I think it's also really important, as one of the many threads that we're talking about, we're actually talking about in the, are we calling that the green room?
Sure.
The space earlier, before we came on stage, about how one of the really cool things that we'd like to do with this non-debate panel is hopefully give people some understanding of what all of this economic rhetoric is actually about, right? So one of those really important things that I think it's important to challenge is when the right wing conceive of or try and see of the state or the government as a sector. I don't think that's right. I think that the government is actually far better characterised as the manifestation of all of our will, of our democracy, of our collective resources, and what we actually collectively and democratically have control over. So when we're talking about what it is that we are trying to achieve democratically, so frequently we're told that the economy is walled off from those democratic decisions, right? It does not have to be. That is a relatively new phenomenon which has become more and more entrenched over the last 40 years. But to that point of particularly housing and the intersection here, you know, in the 1980s through the 1990s, when we went through a process of state house sell-off, we were told that, and it was relatively understood, that lower income New Zealanders wouldn't be able to immediately transition into the private market. So there was something created called the accommodation supplement in order to top up their incomes to allow them to pay rent on the private market. Do you know how much we currently pay that out to? Way too much. $2 billion per annum to bid up the cost of renting, none of that actually meaningfully benefits the renter or the low-income New Zealander, but it lines the pockets of landlords while increasing everybody else's rents through those market dynamics. This is an indication of just how broken a commodified housing market is. So this is why the Greens have been unapologetic for a really long time about shifting that base of investment into far more productive things. It's why we're massive champions for our local small businesses and Buy New Zealand Made. It's why 18 months ago we came out with our industrial strategy, because actually we can have a government that on behalf of all New Zealanders puts their hands back on the wheel of this economy and decides that we actively want to invest to decarbonise. With renewable energy, not only are we lowering people's power bills, we are building resilience to keep our jobs here and to build more jobs, but also actually, and this is another really fun economic point for the nerds, it also reduces our exposure to something called imported inflation. So you will have heard this current government talking about how the books would have been in much better order and inflation would have been much lower if it hadn't been for the fossil fuel crisis.
Oh, Donald Trump's brought all of us our troubles.
Yep. But this government has actively cut funding for decarbonisation and reducing our reliance on fossil fuels, and actually actively is using hundreds of millions of dollars of your money to subsidise more fossil fuels, i.e. to increase our exposure to that imported inflation. So what the Greens see is an opportunity for us to instead invest in ourselves, our resilience, our jobs, our infrastructure, to make ourselves a far more prosperous and productive country.
Just to pick up on something you've said before we go ahead, I just want people to remember as well, when this government talks about external forces like the Strait of Hormuz and that kind of stuff, and other than that, we would have been fine. One of the reasons we set up the podcast was to hold this government accountable to the same standard they insisted on the last government. Because at no time under Labor did they go, oh, you know, COVID, external forces, you know, costs of things going up because of external forces, so Labor's fine with that. You know, so if they didn't allow, look, I actually agree the Strait of Hormuz and external forces are a contributor to inflation, but because these guys didn't allow the last lot external forces for inflation, they just went, high inflation bad, then it's really important, not to be too mean here, but we don't allow these guys to use external forces to justify the inflation they've got. Really important. Craig, housing. Our economy, an economy built on housing.
Well, can I just talk very quickly on that point?
No, of course you can. Of course you can.
Because we talked about this on one of my favourite charts I've used on your podcast before. Nice. I can draw a chart of 38 countries' inflation journeys since 2017, right? And I can draw them going like this, and they all do the same thing. They all go up a bit during COVID, during the Ukrainian conflict, and then they come back down, but they're a bit higher than before. And I can then draw where New Zealand's inflation journey is. And it's boringly average. Now, can you remember you were told that the reason we had inflation was because the government was spending too much money? We were all, you know, there was too much cash going around, and as a consequence, that's why we had a cost of living crisis.
I think the term is a money bazooka.
Yep. Now, either the New Zealand's money bazooka was so powerful, it was driving the inflation in 38 countries.
But hang on, but Jacinda's documentary won an Emmy. That's how powerful she was. So she must have impacted the UK, but surely.
I'm not quite sure how responsible she is for inflation in Hungary.
Oh, okay.
But our inflation story is boringly average because our inflation story is the story of the globe. It's got nothing to do with the spending that we were doing.
But, hang on, but here's a question now. Now, the inflation we're going through now, is that also boringly average, or is it different?
Absolutely boringly average,
okay.
But poor people and the poorest households are more exposed because the costs that are going up the most are the costs you can't avoid.
White bread.
Average again.
It's the average again. The average is 4.1, but if you're poorest 20% of households, your inflation is going up much faster than the wealthiest 20% of households in this country. And that's because rents are going up, rates are going up, electricity prices are going up, food prices are going up, and those are the things you can't avoid. The things that are cheaper are the things that are discretionary purchases. And it doesn't mean much to you that the cost of an international flight got marginally cheaper if you can't afford to put food on the table. but they're both measured in the inflation index, and as a consequence, the average looks better. But to the housing point, to come drag it back to that, as Bernard Hickey famously said, we are a housing market with an economy attached to it. Right? And you very kindly last year dragged me down to Dunedin, and I went just past the park in Dunedin that had a tent city in it.
The Oval, right beside the motorway. By the Kensington.
Yeah.
Where someone died.
And it was snowing. We're a better country than this. Right? We're a better country because we're a country that prides ourselves on security, on social security. The 1938 Social Security Act is the basis of this country. Right? We are a country that prides ourselves on being a place that is secure, that looks after each other. We're a country that should pride ourselves on providing housing security, but we've systematically stopped all of the investment in Kāinga Ora right across this country. I can take you just down the road to Arlington, should be 300 units of housing. It's currently steel coming out of the ground and a very bored security guard. They've just agreed to build 100 houses instead of 300 houses, and the mayor had to drag it out of them. Right? We are a country that can do so much better than this. And the problem is, like much in economics, it's the study of incentives. There's no other investment class in New Zealand where I can take somebody else's money, which is the bank, I can get somebody else to pay, which is the tenant, and I get all the profits tax-free. You're crazy if you don't get involved in it. Until we change that, we are going to continue to incentivize being a housing market with an economy attached to it.
Nice. Qiulae on the housing market.
Well, yes, housing and taxes are obviously one of the Opportunity Party's favourite topics because we have been advocating for a change to our tax system. That is the origins and why this party was born. When I bought my house in one of those 2020 COVID peaks, it was probably about 8 times household income for us to buy our home in Mount Albert in Auckland. And when I chat to my mum and dad, they hark back to the good old days. For them, it was 3 times household income. And I've got 2 kids now who are 5 and 2. And when I look at them and I think if we continue this trajectory, and by the time they're able to buy a house, that could be 10 or 15 times their household income. It's just a completely unsustainable trajectory. Like, it doesn't even seem possible that we could get there. The economy surely is going to collapse before then. So we have to do something about this. And we believe fiercely that our tax reset proposal is the best solution here, but also recognise it as a big change for New Zealand. And having a land value tax means that we incentivise urban development. It means that houses become affordable. Again, we have estimated a 10 to 15% drop in house prices because of it. And as someone who is mortgaged up to my eyeballs, I don't particularly want to lose equity in my home. But I want us to deliver a better economy for my kids and the next generation. And unless we take bold steps like this, again, we are going to force a much more difficult decision, I think, on them to have to make in the future.
So you're saying someone's going to have to take a hit at some stage, and you're saying make it us?
Yeah, and I think, we've proposed a 10-year transition plan, we've proposed deferral schemes for retirees and farmers because we recognise it's harder for them with the cash flow. But we're not going to have a more productive economy with money flowing into our businesses and our shares and funds that will deliver the infrastructure that we so desperately need if, as everybody here has said, the incentives make it far too attractive to invest in housing. So I think this is fundamental to the way that we shape our economy going forward. I think the other point I want to just highlight here is that our tax reset also includes citizens' income. And for us, it's really important that if we are adding a new tax, we are alleviating tax in another area. So, income tax, or what we earn from our work, our take-home pay there. So the citizens' income means there is more money in people's back pockets to be able to pay a land tax if they own their own home. But as soon as you add more and more rental properties, that land tax becomes a lot more painful. And certainly things like land banking, where you just buy up a big piece of inner city land and expect to make capital gains on that over the next 10 years, that kind of behaviour becomes completely disincentivised in that world. It's not a silver bullet for housing. We obviously also have to address supply. But unless we look at our broader tax system and what that means for all of us and how we decide to live and work together as New Zealanders, I think we'll be continuing to hamstring ourselves and we won't be able to move forward.
Cool, thank you. We're going to go to one last question, then we're going to have some chance from questions from the audience. But just before we do, and this is really just a question for you, Qiulae, because land tax, CGT, wealth tax? Where does the Greens sit between? Like, if you're in coalition with that one, or that one, or together, and you guys are debating it on the around the potential cabinet table, how do you guys decide between land tax, CGT, wealth tax, anything else that's going to be in there? Because we're being told you guys are putting in, what are they up to, 29 new taxes? 49 new taxes?
32.
32.
Yeah. As you can see, just how ludicrous this debate is getting, right? And I think this is why I just really hope. I was talking to a woman on the plane the other day about this. She was asking me how things are going in the lead up to the election, and I said, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. We have this incredible moment where if we just spend some time to talk to each other about the things that we want as a country, I guarantee you we will find out that we have so much more in common than the things that divide us. But to your question on the different taxes that are being proposed, I think that this is an amazing opportunity for us to look at what each of those taxes are actually designed to do, because you'll see that they're designed to do slightly different things. Yeah. So what the wealth tax is designed to do, and actually I think it's also worthwhile to spell out what our wealth tax actually is, because obviously it's been subject to many a moral panic and misrepresentation by the likes of the National Party of this country. Our wealth tax, this election, as the Green Party, is for a wealth tax on individual net wealth in excess of $10 million. So first,
Can you just raise your hand if that applies to you, please? A couple of really lucky people there. Good.
Hang on. So that's it's not a scientific survey, but that's 0%. Okay, 0%.
Yeah. So for sake of argument, say we're talking about somebody who has $11 million. Firstly, congratulations, you're in the 0.3% top in this country, top 0.3% in this country. So $11 million. We know that wealth beyond a certain point, and this is based on plenty of international research and also domestic research from the likes of the IRD, that your rate of return on that wealth is around 5% per annum. So for sake of argument, again, for $11 million, you're looking at around $550,000 passively that you are accumulating on top of your wealth per annum, right? We are, as the Green Party, only going to tax you on that $1 million at 2.5%, so the million above the 10 million. That means that you'll pay $25,000 on that million. So you will pay, of the $550,000, $25,000, which means you get to keep $525,000 of passive income tax-free and contribute to this amazing, beautiful society to fix the infrastructure that all of us need.
But
wait, there's more. There's more.
But hang on, I was just going to say, what if I want to buy a third jet ski? I mean, you know.
Or a yacht, or a helicopter, or I don't know, okay. Look, the other really cool thing about this is that it means that 96% of New Zealanders get an income tax cut, but that is not going to be sucked right out of your pocket like many people experienced when this government came in and did its tax cuts, because it also cut public services. What we will also do is unlock the resources necessary to decommodify those essential things which are massively increasing in cost, which means more public ownership of the basic things that we all need, like energy and other cool things that I can't talk about right now, but maybe being announced shortly.
You're coming on the podcast?
But what this is to say is that we have the opportunity as New Zealanders to rebuild the fundamental things that all of us need in collective ownership. So that's the point of the wealth tax, is that it raises the revenue necessary to rebuild our country.
Thanks. It's probably only fair and appropriate that we give you a chance to give us 60 seconds on the CGT and on the land tax, because just to make it fair. And then we've got a question for Ganesh. And let me say before we get there, questions from the audience are going to be shortly. Brie's going to be down the back. Brie Elliott will be down the back of the room with a microphone. If you'd like to ask the panellists a particular question, you can go and find Brie. just being really blunt, not everybody's going to get their question asked. It hasn't happened anywhere. We'll have 20 minutes, 30 minutes max. And if you're watching from online, ask your questions. Kiwi Skirt is moderating in the chat. You're welcome to Super Chat, but Super Chat doesn't guarantee your question will be asked. So online, ask your questions. In the room, find Brie at the back of the room in the next kind of 5-7 minutes. And as we said, thank you for your questions. Apologies if yours doesn't get asked, but that's how we're going to roll after we finish this bit. So, Craig, can you do like 60, 90 seconds on the CGT?
Absolutely. Very briefly, we have a gaping hole in our taxation system, and it's the taxation of capital gains. You pay tax on every dollar of income that you earn. And if we look at the list of notorious left-wing organisations who now support a capital gains tax, they include the World Trade Organization, the OECD, the IMF, the Treasury, the Reserve Bank, the Association of Accountancies of Australia and New Zealand. Right? None of these are ANZ Bank, BNZ Bank. Right?
Marxists.
Stop it. These are not organisations, right, who are necessarily, really in it for you, right? But they're in it because they can see the damage that a lack of a capital gains tax is doing to our economy. They can see the damage that it's doing to our housing market. They can see the damage that it's doing to our accounts. We really need to see a change in the capital gains tax system because you're all paying. It's not fair that you pay tax on every cent that you earn, but somebody who earns money passively by doing nothing but sitting on properties gets to make that income tax-free, and it increases the inequality year after year after year. And just one figure that we had, IDEA produced a report just this week. 88% of all of the capital gains in this country, as measured by IRD, were made by the top 10% of income earners. That's the reason why we need to have a capital gains tax, because the capital gains tax will make sure they're paying tax because you pay tax right now.
Cool. And Q, you want 90 seconds for the land tax?
Well, I sort of explained it a little bit before, but I guess just to... we're not opposed to other kinds of taxes, but our main objective is to deliver a more productive economy, look after those people that really need support, and do those two things at the same time. So if we're going to introduce new taxes, also alleviate that somewhere else. So we do believe that our proposal is the strongest here. Things like a capital gains tax do depend on us selling houses to each other still, and in our view, don't disincentivise things like land banking as much because you'll essentially avoid selling the property to avoid paying the tax. But we are open to having the conversation. I think it's great that there are a range of options here, and for us it's really just important that we are focused on that objective about making our tax system more resilient and driving a more productive economy.
I've got one maybe not super serious question for all three of you. When the other side of the argument is putting forward their view with Pixar characters that kind of look like you, do you think that that's adding more nuance into the conversation, or do you think it's actively making us all dumber?
I get sent those videos. I can't figure out what the strategy is. I was talking to some of our team about this the other day, and I was like, are they trying to bait us so that we then respond with some other daft thing which then draws more attention to their stuff? In politics, comms, this is called negating, which apparently just reinforces what they're trying to say. Or are they really taking New Zealanders for dummies? Yeah, and I think possibly the latter, which is why, again, or thirdly, this could be very much in line with their flood the zone strategy. You know how they've just been doing death by 1,000 cuts across every single sector over the last 3 years to have us running in a million different directions, putting out all of these different fires, which then means people are so exhausted and deflated and actually also oftentimes end up coming away from it feeling disempowered. The number of New Zealanders who for the first time have put in, for example, submissions to Select Committee, who've just been talking to me about how disempowering it feels to be so actively ignored, you know, with the government still pushing ahead with all this stuff under urgency. That's why I think it's really, really important to understand that this process of everybody submitting en masse is actually not about them. It's about us, and it's about our ability as New Zealanders to become more comfortable in articulating what it is, the things that we believe in, what our values are, and communicating that to each other. So all hope is definitely not lost.
They can't run, they're running on this, right, because they can't run on their record, right?
Or vision. Yeah.
Right? They can't run on the fact unemployment's up massively, right? Debt is up, right? The Crown accounts, despite being the best financial managers, right, they're worse than they were, right? They can't run on the health service being better. We've got people waiting for hours and hours and hours in A&E. They can't run on the education system being better. They can't run on investment, except in roads going nowhere, right? They run on tax lies out of necessity, because that's the only thing they've got left. This is not an argument from politics. This is not an argument from some kind of position of intellectual curiosity. This is an argument from them simply out of desperation. So when you hear, oh, we're going to tax you more, there's lots more taxes, oh, worry about the taxes, this is just simply fear and lies, hoping you will respond emotionally rather than responding as a fact, as in looking outside the window and going, are we better off? Because under any reasonable metric, if you look outside this country for the past 3 years, are you better off? You absolutely aren't.
I disagree with you both. I think they're trying to bait you. We know they're the masters at that. Leave that alone. We're going to do some questions from the audience next. So if Brie's got anybody, you guys are welcome to come up the side and get ready to ask some questions. Same for at home. Ganesh, there's a really important question I want to pose just to you, and it feels like this whole conversation has been about that. I don't want to rush you and say, give us the elevator pitch, but for those who didn't see Q&A last weekend, your theory, your concept, your philosophy of being a good ancestor, that kind of sounds like what we've heard a lot about tonight. If you can add anything to that and just educate us some more about the idea of being a good ancestor, I'd love to give you the space to do it before we go to quick Q&A to the audience.
Thank you. Where it started from, it's basically, as I started today, getting the economics back into the conversation and getting the finance and the fiscals down to where it should be, way down the priority order. The technicalities I lay out in what I call the Economic Governance Act that I propose, or bill, until we pass it, hopefully. And essentially it brings together a whole lot of issues. The core one is the Public Finance Act Section 26G, and yes, I am the nerd, thank you. For those who don't know, it says all government policy shall be, what is the other word, in accordance with the principles of responsible fiscal management, okay? Nowhere in that the rest of 26G, or dare I say the rest of the Public Finance Act, is responsible defined. So all we have is a whole lot of KPI targets around fiscal, and nowhere in the Act is there anything about economics, okay? And that's a glaring error. And then I go to the Reserve Bank Act and I go to what MB have to do and what Treasury have to do, and there's no economics anywhere. So that's the objective. And then I say, well, and then I say, well, part of the problem is we haven't got a purpose for the economy. Everything derives from a purpose. You go to MBA school and they'll tell you all about governance and management, and they'll tell you all about taking your team on away days, on expensive corporate trips, and you'll spend forever deciding what your what your objective is, what's your goal, what's your mission, what's your vision. And then you go away with what the strategy is. And then you go to to management, because that other stuff is all governance stuff. And I say, well, actually, where the hell is the governance in all of our legislation? There is no governance. We manage financials, we manage the government's books, we manage inflation, that's the Reserve Bank's job, we manage resources, natural climate, we manage it, we manage a whole lot of us that we manage beneficiaries and numbers. What we don't do is, why are we managing it? What's the friggin' point? What's the point of the economy? What is the objective? What is the purpose? So I, out of the top of my head and a whole lot of reading and everything else, I look to Māori, because that's where I've learnt a lot about a different economic model, and it annoys me, to be honest, when everybody talks to me and comes up to me and says, has anybody else in the world done things differently and better? And I say, well, actually, you don't even have to look very far. You don't even have to look on the doorstep. It's actually within Aotearoa itself. That long-term vision, that purpose of the economy, which is about the next generation, and I've paraphrased it with being a good ancestor, the concept of ownership, not in the concept of rights to sell, but the concept of ownership being giving you responsibility and obligations to look after the resources. And I, as an economist, don't actually give a flying fig about who owns the water. I am way more interested in who's going to cough up to look after the water. That is way, way more important. So that concept of ownership we've got to talk about, the concept of why are we here, what's the point, and then when we get past that's the governance, and yes, the management is important, but the management is subservient to that purpose. Let's be a good ancestor. We inherited a whole lot of resources, economic term, productive resources. It's called people, it's called land, it's called water, it's called buildings and pipes and all those other boring stuff. We've inherited a fair lot of it. You know, the railways. You know, I think we had quite a lot of it given to us. Literally given to us by previous generations. It's not ours to own, it's not ours to sell off. It's ours to look after, invest. Another scary economic term, invest, not financially invest, but invest real effort in looking after those resources. Why? Not because we want to hock them off for a quick buck. Why? Because we want to, it is our job, it is our responsibility and obligation to pass it on to the next generation in a better state that we inherited it in. That is being a good ancestor. And the core resource, which I have to mention in this, is Papatūānuku. We inherited in a bloody good nick. We have done a hell of a lot to her, and I am not at all happy with the state that we are about to pass it on to. So that is the role and purpose of the economy, is to look after the planet, look after the resources we inherit, and pass it on to the next generation. And none of this has got to do with financials.
Yeah, I'm glad we gave you space for that. It was amazing. We're going to go to some Q&A from the audience now, both in the room and online. But I do just want to stop for 30 seconds. We had a meet-up last night, and we met some of our lovely viewers and supporters to the podcast, and also to our patrons. We've had patrons be with us since day one. And for anyone who enjoys our content, if you're enjoying this tonight and you don't even know who we are, the main reason you're able to be here tonight and they're able to see this stuff tonight is based on these people who have been supporting us, some of them since day one. So I just want to have a moment right now to say thanks so much to our patrons, and also to say to you, if you're enjoying what you're seeing and you like what we do, you're more than welcome to join us to be a part of the whānau, to help us continue to make these kinds of products, to have these kinds of conversations moving forward. I think there'll be a QR code on screen right now or something, and we go from there. So thanks to our patrons. And actually, you know, if you are a patron, you're one of the reasons we're doing this, and we owe as much gratitude to you as we get thrown at us for holding these things as well. So thank you. Thank you.
I just want to jump on the end of that as well. As we've done this for the BHM podcast for about 4 years now, when we started speaking about doing this, what was a debate and it's now turned into discussion because
Happening.
Cowardice. We've had meetups with our Patreon group, with our with people that watch the show every night. And the thing that never, ever occurred to us when we decided to monetize bitching about politics at the pub is the community that sprung up of people going, finally I've found my people. And there are people out there, and there's a lot of us that give a shit about the same thing. So remember that when you go into the voting booth, that you are voting for each other.
All right. Me and Chewie get to take a bit of a break now, and we're going to throw it over to Brie. And Brie, you've got some questions from the audience.
Awesome. All right, I'm here with my choir, and we've got some questions. So we're going to start with someone who I actually met through the musical theatre scene here in Wellington. So this is James with a question.
Hey, thanks for the conversation tonight. I've really appreciated it. The question that I have is, in the 1980s, overnight we achieved radical transformation in our economy under a first-past-the-post environment. Now, in an MMP environment where we're looking at consensus building, how do we achieve the same radical transformation quickly? Because we need to.
What a question. Okay.
Only the finest for you, Chloe. Only the finest.
I mean, I think one of the things about the change in the 1980s is that a lot of people didn't necessarily vote for that change to happen in that way, right? They were quite surprised by how that change came about. Therefore, I wouldn't look at it as a model of how we should do things that are sustainable and resilient and bring people together. I also, respond quite a lot to folks who go, okay, well, this current government has just torn up the rule book and used on urgency to abuse, push through everything that they want to see, including a bunch of stuff that they did not campaign on. Why don't you guys just do the same? Because, might be these guys. I think that actually we need to hold ourselves to higher standards because we actually do fundamentally need to hold on to the vestige of this thing called democracy. So that's where, in the conversations that myself and Martima have with Chippy, we've currently been trying to orient ourselves in such a way that we are able to present to the public prior to the election date real clarity on what we will use urgency for, particularly in the first 100 days, and also the things that we will repeal, so that it isn't just this kind of vortex that everybody gets thrown into post-November 7th. But I think the kind of crux of your question is, can we achieve radical change or not? If you look at the history of this country, every half century or so, obviously in the 30s and 40s and then in the 80s and 90s had a form of it. Turns out we're right on time for the next version. That means that I think in order for that to happen properly, we actually just need to have as much consensus as possible from New Zealanders to hold whoever is in Parliament accountable to making that actually happen. And that's why I think it's important to understand that election campaigns shouldn't be this one-off flash in the pan, put your people into Parliament. It is actually actively about building community and understanding of how politics and power works so that, long term, we don't leave politics to the politicians because we'll get what we've always got.
Yeah. We have a lot of questions. If someone wants to continue, we might not get to everybody every time.
Just very briefly.
Yep, that's all.
Just very briefly. Can I slightly disagree with how you framed it, just because I actually don't think it happened quickly, right? Much of the changes during the 1980s were actually really long thought through for a very long time, and there were a lot of people campaigning and doing the intellectual legwork so that they could then go, right? It took a while. Right? And the thing that they used was a crisis. It was the economic crisis of the time that gave them the space to do that. The Social Security Act, 1938, came about because of a crisis. And we used that crisis and we leaned into that crisis to create the welfare state, to create the health service that we have today. We can't waste a good crisis. And right now,
Climate crisis, biodiversity
knows
crisis.
we have crises to deal with. And we should be using those and using the opportunity of those to say, what are the solutions that are actually going to make a difference? And importantly, build not just the political consensus for them, but build the NGO community, build the trade union movement, build the community movements, which will actually help both hold the government to account, but also help sustain that reform and sustain that change whenever we actually inevitably change the government.
Q, do you want to quickly mention something on it?
I fully agree with that. I think, the quote goes, you have to go slow to go fast. And I do think that is how good, enduring change happens.
I think also, Craig, just to echo what you're saying, sounds like what you're saying on a different way of looking at it is people think Donald Trump is this radical change, but actually George W. Bush laid the groundwork for and it feels like it's quick, but actually if you look back through history, it's come from quite a long time.
Absolutely, and many of the economic changes we've had look like they've just suddenly turned up from space, but they're actually products of generations of thought.
Yep. Brie.
Hi, I'm Frank. I'm a community worker. I'm a blogger as well in my spare time. As a question, first of all, thank you all candidates for turning up. You show more courage than certain other individuals. Thank you. My question is, it's kind of pointed towards Labour, and this is no reflection on you, Craig, because you're kind of new to this one. But it seems to me that every time the Prime Minister / CEO / landlord has come out with some absurd comment, we don't really hear much from the Labour Party now as an opposition to really get stuck in and to expose the absurdities of what he's saying. And I'll give you an example. Just recently, in the last week, I think, was reported on RNZ that he said that we have to be more productive so that we pay more tax and we can get all the good stuff that we really want in this country. But here's the thing. Every time the government has built up the revenue, usually a national government has given away 8 tax cuts since 1986, including 1986, 8 tax cuts. So every time they build up that revenue, it's been frittered away and given away, usually to the highest income earners. Now, why not challenge Luxon on this sort of thing every time he opens his mouth and just be a little bit more aggressive in what you guys have to say?
Very quickly, there's a quote from Napoleon, right, which is, never interrupt your enemy whilst they're making a mistake, right? Then, right now, politics has almost been suspended. The election's almost been suspended because we're busy working out who's the leader of the National Party, right? And politics, sort of the day-to-day debate of what should we be doing and how should we be doing it and where should we be spending money has been actually reduced to reporters chasing cars coming onto the forecourt of Parliament and asking, do you support the leader? Right? We've got a job of work to do over the next 70 days, regardless of whatever theatre of circus is going on over there, to tell everybody here, everyone in Wellington, everyone around the rest of the country, what a change in government can do and what it will mean. That's what I do every day, knocking on doors in Wellington Bays. It's what I do every day when I try and talk to people and tell them about how a change in government will change their lives. It's what I also encourage you to do. So regardless of the theatre that's going on over there, I encourage everybody here to do 2 things. Go out, tell your friends, register to vote, because the government's changed the law and we expect about 70,000 people to lose the ability to vote as a consequence of that. That's 2 people in the House. That's 4 people change in terms of the actual House. That's the difference between government and opposition right now, and that's a deliberate decision. So register to vote.
70,000, it's about 140-ish thousand to get to 5%, eh?
Yep.
So that's halfway to 5%.
Yep. And 2 is to go out there and tell everybody that change is possible, and not only possible, but necessary. Because the results that we're getting right now from this government are the results that we will get if we get 3 more years of them. So go out there, talk to people, regardless of what's going on out there, your job is really important. I really need you to do it because we have 70 days left to make this a one-term government.
Kia koutou. Blinky Bill, Punal Facts. I've got a question in regards to leveraged properties. Okay? Now, the issue I find that we have here in Aotearoa, like we're talking about homelessness and people having issues in buying their own property. Okay, and yet a super landlord can take one of his houses and leverage it on another, and then bring a beneficiary into that home and have that beneficiary pay that mortgage with the very subsidy that the government is giving. And then that person has no equity because it's been handed over to a super landlord. So I'd like to ask, will any of you do anything about this?
Apply a land tax so that it's more painful for those landlords to build those big property portfolios.
Yeah, well, I see it when one landlord can come in, buy a house, then leverage that a year later for another house, and just to bring in a beneficiary. Okay, and a beneficiary themselves have a lot of trouble going in to actually get a house for themselves because a beneficiary is like, oh, you're a beneficiary, you can't service the loan. Okay, and yet that beneficiary can be utilised to pay a mortgage for somebody else.
Can I give you one policy that'll make a real difference tomorrow, right? Build more houses, right? Because we've got a state house builder in Kainga that wants to build houses, that should be building houses, that has the historic proven ability to build warm, dry homes right across this country. We've got the land. We've lost 19,000 people out of the construction workforce in the past 2 years. And we all know where they are because they're in Australia, earning more money because the government's kicked the bottom out of the construction market in this country. We can employ people. We can get economies moving. We can put people in warm, dry homes, and we can tackle exactly that problem because then we don't have people able to exploit the system in the way that you're talking about right now.
And
Chloe,
if I can just briefly add on to that. Feel free to, yep. So welcome. So you all probably know about this game called Monopoly, right? It was originally called the Landlord's Game, invented by a woman called Lizzie McGee in the early 1900s in order to teach children about the pitfalls of an economy that is based on land speculation and luck. What did we go and do, guys? We did not learn that lesson. But look, at the end of the day, although funnily enough, actually, Carlos Chung, who's one of the largest landlords in our parliament, was waving around the Monopoly game, seemingly completely unaware of that irony just the other day when we were talking about taxes and how reductive this debate is getting. But look, alongside building public housing, I think it is also really fundamental that we actually change the way that renting happens in this country. One of the most dastardly things that this government has done to undermine renters' rights is to enable no-cause convictions, because you are not able to meaningfully enforce any of your other ostensible supposed rights if you risk being evicted for no cause, right? It just does not add up. So we have to revoke that legislation, but more than that, we have to build a register for property managers and landlords, which then means that they are accountable for bad behaviour. We have to have a rental warrant of fitness, which actually just gives some teeth to healthy home standards, and we also need rent controls.
So our drug checking providers do incredible work saving lives, and between all of them they get about $1 million of funding per year. So my question is, would you give them more funding so they could actually do more for our community? Yes. And do you know who helped to change that law? Section 12 of the Misuse of Drugs Act 1975? Yeah. For the uninitiated, Misuse of Drugs Act is one of the most anti-evidence, insane pieces of law that we currently have on the books, because it pretends as though we are going to be dealing with, or able to meaningfully deal with, addiction and abuse of substances through criminalisation. Clearly, that is not working. Drugs are winning the war on drugs. So in the last 6 years of the former Labour-led government, I managed to work with successive ministers to get a few different changes across the line. One of those was for Section 7 for police discretion, which resulted in, until the change of government, far lower prosecution rates of around 34% reduction for low-level drug offences being pushed through the criminal courts. Section 12 previously made it illegal to knowingly provide an event or location in which people were consuming illicit substances. So the amendment that we got through with Know Your Stuff, and we actually got Wendy Ellison out of this, the first ever New Year's honours for drug harm minimisation, which was very cool. That then meant that we all of a sudden were able to have those drug checking services all across the country. I only was able to get across the line at the time $700,000 per year or so for Know Your Stuff and for other providers to be able to provide the service. And also still this really bizarre way that the ministries and departments understood it, which is that apparently drug consumption or illicit drug consumption only happens at festivals and not in bars or nightclubs or houses and parties all across this country every other day of the week. So static sites was something that we were advocating for, but unfortunately weren't able to get the funding for. So yes, very clearly the Greens have the track record for this, but we actually need to fundamentally change the Misuse of Drugs Act 1975 and get rid of that Frankenstein and replace it with a harm minimisation approach.
Qiulae, one of the things about us as voters is there's lots about opportunity we don't know about. I know nothing about Opportunity's perspective on this kind of issue. I'd love you to share to it.
Yeah, definitely. So we have been basically on the same page since the beginning in 2017. That we do need to decriminalise drug possession, that we need to take a health and rehabilitation approach to this. Yeah. We follow the evidence.
Follow the evidence. Brie.
Kia ora. Hi, my name's Nathan. I'm a student nurse, and the current government made many promises during the last election, and as many of you have said, many poor decisions that have negatively impacted the majority of Kiwis. So my question is, how is we as the public, or you as members of Parliament, can hold the current or future governments accountable for broken promises and poor decisions?
Can I talk to that one?
Yeah, go.
One of the most important ones is that we, as governments, we make promises about fiscal management. We talk about how much money we're going to spend in a place. We talk about tax. We talk about actually spending commitments along the way on elections. And I can tell you, as someone who's costed the National Party's tax policies many times to their great annoyance, right? They don't add up. We need an Office of Budget Responsibility, an Office of Fiscal Responsibility, as is common around the rest of the world, in order to hold governments to account when they say, but growth will come. And look, here's the chart that says growth coming in the future.
It's a bigger pie.
Yeah.
We'll just make the pie bigger.
Yeah. And it doesn't turn up, right? Because the assumptions that they use along the way generate that, but no one tells you about the assumptions. When they say, but you can afford this tax cut with no borrowing, and then 2 minutes later the borrowing turns up, right? We need an Office of Budget Responsibility in order to actually deliver exactly that, because the more we can be transparent about that, the more we can be honest about that, the better the conversation we can have as a public about what we actually should be spending money on or what we shouldn't be spending money on. Because right now, we do ourselves a massive disservice the way we actually hold those conversations in the public right now. It is, brother, and you can see that in the fiscal strategy, which went out last week, which committed us to exactly delivering the Office of Budget Responsibility as a creature of Parliament, not as a creature of Treasury, right? So that you will have confidence in it as a completely independent entity.
And just as a really important background on that, we actually did try to do it in the first term of the Ardern-led government, but it was shut down by Simon Bridges, who then was the leader of the National Party, because as Craig's alluding to, we tried to do it through a parliamentary officers process. There is the ability to do it through a legislative process. And just for greater context, we've also tried to do it in this term, so I've written a litany of letters to Nicola Willis and also asked her about this in Scrutiny Week in Finance and Expenditure Select Committee. She's consistently committed to it, but got cold feet, seemingly as a result of coalition partners.
Who knew why?
But yes, basically we can do it, and yes, you've got two parties here committed to it.
Barbara Edmonds has had this as a private member's bill inside the biscuit tin in Parliament. There's absolute commitment here to delivering that, because it's the best way we can do that.
There's someone sitting beside you, Ganesh, wants to know about, is there a three-way commitment to this, Qiulae?
So yeah, I mean, we've come out and supported an independent costing unit previously as well. So,
yep. So it sounds like there's consensus.
Yeah.
Ganesh, you seem keen to jump in.
I hate to spoil the party here. I worry about a unit that's focused on fiscals. Okay? Yeah. It's a progress, I'll give you that. Yeah. But where's the Office for Economic Responsibility?
100%.
And can I just add my proposal? Am I allowed to pitch my proposal again?
Please.
Part of my Economic Governance Act had a Council of Economic Governors, which basically is the public servants, the heads of all the public service agencies, partly to get them together to get rid of the silos, but also in there in the wording is they're responsible not to ministers but to the public. Their reports go to public through Parliament. They don't go to ministers in the first instance. So part of the institutional structure, if you're sure about holding government to account, is to change those institutional structures so we have a public service that services the public rather than ministers.
I mean, if you can do like a response real quick.
I want to agree with the fact that, yes, this is still on fiscal metrics. However, part of the problem that we have at the moment is that there is no objective entity that is able to tell everybody this is going to be the impact of different political parties' promises. And one of the key things that I've consistently posed in the criteria necessary to make the Parliamentary Budget Office successful is for it to have really clear transparency about the likes of the implications on climate commitments. Because one of the things that has been able to fly under the radar because this government is banking on it being too complex for people to understand is something called our nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. So in the Paris Agreement, out to 2030, we as a country, along with 190 others, have all committed to emissions reductions at a certain level, something called our nationally determined contribution or our NDCs. Every time that the government slashes domestic climate action, we can still meet our NDC if we pay other countries to reduce their emissions. This is the case that the Greens have been trying to make, and we have had the government consistently say they're committed to meeting our NDC out to 2030, but that they're not going to send money offshore while they're simultaneously also cutting domestic climate action. So the point of a Parliamentary Budget Office is to make that transparent. We did manage to, as the Greens, as a result of our work in the FEC, get Treasury to commit to providing some transparency on this, and they dropped it weirdly around a few weeks after the government's budget when we were all at field days. But they made it clear then that the cost of this government's inaction, or rather the shredding of climate action, is to the tunes of billions of dollars. So we need that stuff transparent in the budget itself.
Just to point out, Qiulae was worried that if we went too long, it might get boring. Are you guys all okay? Because, you know, you're like, who would sit here for 2 hours and listen to us? I think Craig said they'll be climbing up
Fiscal
the walls.
policy.
Are you okay? I'm just pointing out that the longer answers means we might go to the end. Just putting that out there. Next one, Brie.
Youth unemployment. It was mentioned it's currently at 37%. It's gone up, and it seems to be the pattern. I'm old enough to know that the pattern seems to be that youth unemployment goes up whenever there's harsh economic conditions. I wasn't going to say if you want to mention any specific policies about improving unemployment, but go ahead. But I just want, if you could sort of do a layman's terms explanation of why it affects youth unemployment so much, and how it will improve when economic conditions improve.
And probably what we're asking is, if you guys form a government, how do we turn this around? Do you want to start? Oh, how about Craig? Or Q, you haven't started for a while. Do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I mean, I get this question a lot at meetings, young people going, how are you going to make my life better? And I wish I could have an answer which says, we've got a policy that's going to make young people's lives better next year or the next 3 years. But in reality, I think these are the bigger, longer-term economic settings that we do need to change. Obviously, our citizens' income supports all people when they're going through periods of unemployment. That is one of the great benefits, is that if you suddenly find yourself being made redundant or having to take time out to look after a sick loved one, you have a floor of financial security that can support you through that. It also means that people leave university with a lot less debt because they're not having to borrow as much for living costs and things like that. As well as that, we really want to see much more investment in innovation and science and technology, because that is what will build the businesses and the industries of the future that our young people will want to be here for, and the high-wage jobs that will be really meaningful for them. But all of those things are big long-term changes. We do have a few other things like free public transport that would make lives easier for young people. I think the apprenticeship schemes are really good as well, but what we're really focused on is the big underlying settings that we need to make take courage to make now, so that we're not finding ourselves in this situation in another 10 years.
Can I just seek clarity first of all? You just said the citizens' income would benefit all people. Didn't we find out that 10% of us aren't eligible for it? So that's not all people?
Yeah, so it's not every adult. It's got the same requirements around accessibility to benefits. So you need to be a permanent resident. If you are a recent migrant, you are not eligible until you reach that permanent residency. The point around Kiwis returning from overseas, the point that I didn't make on Q&A, was where you have to have been in New Zealand for 5 of the previous 10 years. So if you go overseas for 5 years, you come back, you're immediately eligible for citizens' income. If you go away for 7, you need to spend 2 years here contributing to the economy.
But just for complete accuracy, when you say it's for all people, there are some criteria where some may be excluded for temporarily.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Craig.
Just very briefly.
I was more specifically asking about employment and how economic conditions affect employment.
Just very briefly, you're absolutely right. We've seen youth unemployment and underemployment rocket. We've seen that go up. The fastest growing group of workers in New Zealand are those actually 65 plus. Right? And they're growing because the superannuation doesn't pay the rent. Right? Superannuation is based upon the idea that you own your home when you're 65, and if you're renting when you're 65, you still have to work. So they're the fastest growing group of workers across the country. Young people are really suffering because the economy isn't growing, opportunities aren't being created, and when opportunities aren't being created, that foot in the door job doesn't exist. And when you see unemployment rising as it is now, people are trading down in jobs. So you may have had a very well-paid job. If you lose your job, you'll take a job that's paid much less because you've just got to put food on the table, because our welfare state pays so little, you're absolutely desperate. So one of the things we need to do is to stop pulling the ladder away. Right? So we've cut benefits for 18, 19-year-olds. Why? It's mad. Right? We've added every year of this government 6% year on year on year on the cost of tuition fees for the cost of doing the right thing, going to university, getting a skill, and we've made it more and more expensive. We've taken away first year and then last year free. We've done everything we possibly can to make the world harder for young people, and then we've got the temerity to turn around and blame them, right? We need to change that because it's not working for us, right? So we have to make sure. So trades training, one of them, double the trades training program. Today there was an announcement about Māori trades training and supporting additional funding for Māori trades training, making sure that we're taking the people that we actually train in essential services, be it police, nursing, fire, all of whom are actually massively understaffed right now, right? Our job is really simple, right? We have to build an economy where there is opportunity and where there's opportunities for young people so that they can get on and build the lives that they want to deliver. And that's what we need to deliver in 70 days' time.
The really short answer is we can have a government that actually puts its hands on the wheels of the economy and invests in things that will create jobs. Investing in renewable energy generation, investing in building public housing results in far more construction and trades jobs, and has massive spillover benefit for the private market in terms of also then hiring a bunch of people to do great things. But also we need to invest in education, as Craig has said very clearly. We start to see people going into tertiary education when unemployment is high, and right now they're being punished for the only option that is available to them, which also actually, most people don't go into study solely for their own individual benefit, but to contribute. I've been talking to some early childhood teachers recently who've been telling me the reason that nobody studies nursing or goes into firefighting or goes into early childhood education for the money or the glory. They do it because they want to contribute to this country and to this society. So we need to recognise that contribution and pay it properly.
Brie, we got an online question.
Yes, we do. This is from Volpix298.
Why not?
So this is a question for Q, but I think any of you could answer this. You seem to have beliefs based on trust in businesses to do the right thing, but businesses sometimes seek profit. When profit comes at the opposite of doing good, how do you balance that?
Yeah, I've spent my whole career trying to unpack this, and if we don't put the right regulations and rules in place, businesses will pursue profit at all costs, and that's why I'm here. That's why I went to work at KPMG, because I wanted to change the rules for everyone. We can't rely on a few businesses or a few people doing the right thing because they know that it will be better for the environment or for people. We have to level the playing field and make that the norm. And actually, more and more businesses are realising that when you take that view, that is better for your bottom line long term. That creates more resilient businesses. That creates a more resilient economy when we invest in nature and we invest in people. So I do think that mentally, that mindset shift is starting to change, but that is why we need really clear and consistent government direction on this. Otherwise, profit at any cost will continue to be the shortcut that many businesses will take.
Cool. Did you want to add in? You can jump in if you want.
I think one of the things that really differentiates our economy to many others is you look across a lot of the Western world, inequality is rife, but we also have a very unique feature. It does exist in other economies, but it's quite acute here. Just how much of the money that our economy generates ends up going offshore as a result of the multinational corporations that control so much of our market. And we have actually the likes of those Marxist institutions like the World Trade Organization pointing out that market concentration of power, those are leftists, market concentration of power is actually one of the major impediments for productivity in this country. Because when you have these big lumbering monopolies or oligopolies, of course they're not going to invest in innovation, they're just interested in extracting as much money as is possible out of the people who are kind of trapped and held hostage to them, right? So this is why we actually do have to pay attention to the monopolistic powers that exist, and that looks like reorienting our economy to support local business, because that is actually where we get money circulating locally, creating local jobs, investing in our local infrastructure, and being good, because that's closer to the ground as well, where those small businesses are far more accountable to the communities that they are directly in.
Because there's one thing, and it's not on finances or anything, it's at the sharp end of this when it comes to workers. We're a country that kills 17 workers a week as a consequence of their work, right? Every 15 minutes, so we'll have been talking for 2 hours, every 15 minutes in this country, we put a worker in hospital for about a week as a consequence of an injury at their work, right? That's 5 times, the death rate in New Zealand is 5 times the death rate it would be in the UK. It's twice the death rate of that of Australia. When people say, oh, we just have to let companies get on and innovate and do things, we've got a government that's just changed the health and safety laws to make it easier for companies to do business, make it easier for companies to injure workers. That has to change, right? And we have to make sure we don't have appropriate guardrails, we have appropriate laws that are enforced in this country, and we resource those laws appropriately, so we make sure we're protecting workers from exactly that sort of profit-seeking activity.
All right, thank you, guys. Brie, this will be our last question for the night, and then we'll wrap up.
Kia ora, my name is Nick. I'm a big nerd who's been taking notes. So I took a note, Chloe, when you said that the Westminster system doesn't actually incentivise parties and people to make good policy and work together. So, question for everyone on the panel, because I know Ganesh, your input has been fantastic as well. How would you change New Zealand's constitutional system and our arrangements for the better?
Just a small question.
In 60 seconds.
Small last question.
Well, that's part of my, dare I say, part of my Economic Governance Act. Part of the problem is we haven't got a purpose, and actually the government doesn't know where it derives its authority at the moment from. It's just out of thin air. It's accepted as authority, so we put down in legislation that the government has governance authority drawn from the 2 critical documents, Te Tiriti o Waitangi and E Whakaputanga, alongside the unwritten social contract that many of us have, which that contract, that relationship between government and its citizenry, that gives the government authority to drive or regulate economic activity consistent with the purpose that it has been given. That purpose is driven from Te Tiriti o Waitangi, He Whakaputanga, and that social contract, which is being a good ancestor. And I believe being a good ancestor probably fits with those three documents. We can then argue about what's inside those things, but that's up for the democratic process. But the constitutional framework is we derive that authority from those three documents. The missing element around accountability is the extra overarching governance power above it. And in my proposal, I basically fudged it and put some entrenched clauses in to say we couldn't change the being a good ancestor. Ideally, that would be changeable by some superpower or organisation above it. I'm thinking of something like a constitutional wānanga. I don't know how it would be made up. I hesitate to go down the House of Lords or the second chamber route because that's just another Westminster stuff. So it's got to be something that's unique to our nation as a Pacific nation. But yes, we've got to change something. All of it, all of it.
Yeah, I think moving towards a stronger constitutional basis for this country is really important and well overdue. And back to my earlier point of giving the public benefit of the doubt that we have the power to make that constitutional arrangement and make it work for all of us, I think is really key. Another thing, I think, when you look at some of the more mature MMP systems around the world, there is a lot more cross-fertilisation of ideas and parties working together across the left-right divide. And I think if we can get to that point, that might require changes in the way that we form governments or the way that we work together to create laws. But we might have more cross-fertilisation of ideas, less tribalism, and would mean we have more enduring legislation.
Just very briefly, I think if we live in a country where overnight $13 billion vanished from pay equity claims from 350,000 low-paid workers, and it took, what, a day to legislate it in the House? Yeah. Right? It would be, you're exactly right, Ganesh, it would be illegal in most other jurisdictions around the world. Right? That tells you our system is broken. Right? So we absolutely need to be reducing the use of urgency in the House. We absolutely need to be building a longer-term approach to policy making and a longer-term approach to actually what is it we're trying to do? What is it we're trying to fix? What's our 10-year plan for the health service, which actually we can stick to broadly? And that 10-year plan doesn't involve 10-year private partnerships, right, for private healthcare providers, right? We need to be building lots more ways in which we're actually delivering long-term objectives and long-term policy making in this country. And that means actually a lot more political consensus and a lot more political conversation rather than less.
Around 15 or so years ago, I was at 95 BFM, #1 alternative radio station in Auckland, and we were in the midst of the flag referendum. And I remember talking to a bunch of legal... I was just like, why are we spending all of this time and energy on our branding and not who we are as a country and what makes us who we are? I was simultaneously finishing off my law degree and realised that this was the constitutional conversation, right? So there's some phenomenal people that have done a lot of work on this, the likes of obviously Jeffrey Palmer, published a book with Andrew Palmer, and Matiki Mai, which is a phenomenal framework for what it looks like to actually honour he whakaputanga me te tiriti o Waitangi. But really, to the point just made before, we're one of only a handful of jurisdictions in the world at the moment that do not have a supreme codified constitution. What that means is that if the government decides to, under urgency, strip away your rights as under the Bill of Rights Act, the best that you can do is go to the Supreme Court, get something called a Declaration of Inconsistency, and only as a result of a law change we made last term, Parliament has to debate it. They don't have to do anything about it, though. So, yes, basically we need constitutional transformation. As to how we get there in a way that actually brings people together, I think that needs to centre our values and actually honesty about our history as well. So politicians need to be mature in that, but that's also actually an area that I think that we could see the likes of a citizens' assembly do some serious work on.
Those are all really good answers. I'd just like to say, if you make me king for approximately 3 weeks, I can solve all of this. Okay. I think that is the end of our discussion tonight. I'd like to thank all of you for coming out and helping us fill this wonderful space. And I'd also like to thank our very, very kind guests for coming and giving us the benefit of their experience and their knowledge. I think a big round of applause for everyone. For those in the room here, I'm going to do another sneaky wee plug for the merchandise at the back of the room on special tonight. And for those of you at home, also on the internet, some of it has my face on it. Some of it has a cartoon of Nicola Willis driving a boat that will never be here. Some of it really annoys Winston Peters, so I think it deserves a new home at your house. The other thing that I would like to acknowledge, and we kind of touched on it a little bit, is these events started off as the idea of a debate. And we didn't get 100% buy-in from everyone. And in some cases, we found out about that really, really short notice. That has led to a criticism of we have just created an echo chamber. I want to make the point that BHN, we have an open door in our echo chamber that they can come in and make it less of an echo chamber. Our emails are open, they have our phone numbers, we hold space for them if they want to come on anytime. And I think even with those of us on the left, we do want to hear from them. We do want them to stand up and say, this is why we did it this way. Because the more we silo ourselves, the more polarised this discussion gets. But the silver lining to that is here we have all of our panel here, acknowledging the problems that this country have, showing us a vision for how we can go forward, and including everybody in it. And I think that is a very strong silver lining to our particular echo chamber. Now, you have homework. I hear my ADHD tribe in that groan there. The job is to go out and have human conversations with the people in your lives, your friends, your families, your workmates. That is what is going to change the needle. That is what is going to change the government. The other side have intellectually dishonest, AI-generated slop. We can beat that. So please, go out, make sure that your friends and family are registered, have those conversations, and let's topple a government.
Thanks, guys. That's us for tonight. Once again, a big round of applause for our panel. And we'll see you on Monday at 9 p.m. for the next edition of BHN.